They put above ourselves those who have the whiter skin color. Because even the Black Americans who are in the US look down on the Africans. Why do you go killing the man who has a fellow color of your skin because he looks like you? I never seem to understand it.
If there was a way for us to get the storytellers within Africa to share their stories with other Africans and make their stories go global from Africa without having to go through the West, do you think that would be a great start to solving this?
That would be not just a great, but an amazing start and foundation. That would be an amazing foundation to begin a whole lot, because there is a whole lot that African writers can do for themselves without having to wait for the West.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Ronu Spirit podcast, where you follow my learning journey as I explore potential ways to empower African nations, address the legacies of colonization, and enhance the global respect for Black and African people worldwide. My name is Hameed. My guest today is Awe, and as usual, we have Dr. Sumaira Falha in the background, serving as my clarity coach. Say hello, Dr. Falha.
Hello everyone.
Wonderful. Awe Ogon is a qualified Nigerian lawyer and a prolific writer, playwright, poet, and storyteller. Her published works include Secrets of the Book, The Dead Do Talk, Conversations with God, Misnomer, which is a collection of poems, and Aida. Did I pronounce that right? Is it Aida?
Yeah, you pronounced it very well, Aida.
Yeah, Aida, which is a theatre play, which she also produced. She's passionate about getting African writers recognized on a global scale and using storytelling to uphold African traditions and cultures whilst passing it on to the next generation. Welcome, Awe. It's a pleasure to finally get this thing going.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
No problem. Great to have you. I have so many things to discuss. Hopefully we have enough time to get through it today. Let's start at the very beginning. What led you into what you're doing today, into being a writer? And I think we discussed it a bit over the phone when we had our first conversation, which was that you studied law at university. Let's go back before you studied law. What is it that your dad did, how you became, why you chose law, and so on. So yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Why did I choose law? Actually, I wouldn't say I chose law. I always wanted to be a journalist. I always wanted to study mass communication in university. Growing up as a child, I was into stories already. I loved stories. I would always read newspapers. My dad had this thing every day he comes back from work, he has a Punch or a Vanguard, and I would always take them and read them. Even when I was in nursery, primary school, secondary school, and also I knew I wanted to do mass communication, be a journalist, be a writer. I find it very exciting. So that's really what I wanted. But then I was a daddy's girl. I was always my dad, and as a child, you want to please your dad. And I know my dad always wanted a lawyer. He would always tell me, I didn't ask you to study law. I said I wanted a lawyer, and you were like, Daddy, okay, I'll be your lawyer. And I'm like, okay, there's something called implied coercion. So that's how I got into law, literally because my dad wanted a lawyer, and I got the course, the admission into university. But if I were allowed, I would have picked mass communication as the course I wanted to study.
Awe is currently talking to us live from Ghana. The interconnection is a bit shaky. You chose law because your dad always wanted a lawyer.
That's the reason why I studied, because I was very close to my dad, and as a little child, you want to do something, whatever it takes to please your father. But I mean, I was a child, left to myself, I would have wanted to be a journalist.
Yes, you're right. That is what you ended up becoming. You said that the love for stories and journalism came from just reading newspapers, right? What was it about those stories and that you were reading in newspapers that made you think this is what I wanted to do? Like, I want to write my own stories. I want to do journalism. What was it about?
As individuals, we always have this innate passion. Even when we are little, we call them hobbies a lot of times, but these things are our passions, are really what we love to do, what we do effortlessly. As a child, I know I particularly was taken to storytelling, and I used to love writing. I used to love writing a lot of poems as a kid. And I had to have books from way back secondary school where I would write my poems and all that. And growing up as a child in Nigeria back in the day, we used to have Tales by Moonlight. It was a television program every Sunday. They'll go to the TV because it's going to be Tales by Moonlight. You have this woman who is telling little children stories, and then you have people animating it, acting it out. I used to enjoy that. And I would imagine that one day I'm that woman seated and telling stories also. We also had Storyland. We had The New Masquerade. It was a TV show. And these were things that really built up. I wasn't the only person who was watching this. I had siblings who were also watching it, but they didn't take the interest in it. So I could actually say it was just an innate passion. It was just something that I was meant to do, that I saw as a hobby back in the day. As a little child, it's just something you love to do. But I always wanted to be that person on the news, reading the news, and welcome to today is good.
Yeah.
Especially when I watch the NTA news, serial Stoba, and the rest, that you're like, okay, one day I'm going to be that person seated there and reading the news. I like it.
That is so interesting that as a young kid, as a young child in Nigeria, you were interested in the news, because I wasn't interested in the news. I wasn't paying attention to news and thinking, oh, I always thought the news was boring, but you loved it.
I never missed NTA news. Like a child, I never missed the news.
And I suppose that came from the relationship with your dad, like you said. But you told me something about your dad earlier on when we had our previous conversation, which was that he was living in the West. He was living in USA or UK before he came back to Nigeria.
Yeah, he was in the US. He did his university in Italy. He studied medicine in Italy. And then when he was done, he went to the US for his house job. And then from there, he got a job. He was a pediatrician and he got all the degrees they get in medicine. And he was working there in a hospital. He had his green card and everything. He lived there, married there. Started having my first two brothers were born there. But he was very passionate about home. He was very passionate about Africa. He was very passionate about my people. According to him, he wasn't satisfied being this top pediatrician in the US, making all the money, living the good Western life. And then his people are back home and there is no medical services. Because he was the first medical doctor in my village, in Ogoja local government. Yeah, he was.
Amazing.
He left all that. He left everything and came down to Ogoja, which was a very small place. A very small place for someone who has had all the knowledge, the exposure, who had a good life for himself in the US. And he gave that all up and came down to Ogoja to build a hospital. That was the first hospital, the general hospital, which is still in existence today. It's a very big hospital now. And he became the first managing director of the hospital and made sure that medical services were given. And from there, he was now transferred to Calabar, which is the capital of Cross River State, as the Director General of Ministry of Health. So his passion just brought him back, because if you ask him, like, I literally kept asking, why did you leave? Why did you come back to Nigeria? And he's like, my people needed me. I needed to come back for my people to give back. So the people who built me up.
That's inspirational. That is amazing. That is an amazing story. And I suppose having a father like that has that passion and that sense of purpose and sense of drive that he wants to give back. I suppose that influenced you, especially when you started realizing your love for journalism and everything. Would you say that influenced you in some way?
Greatly. It inspired me greatly. Growing up as a child and watching your parents, we pick things from them that they don't say to us. I grew up seeing my father being in this position of wealth, but yet not exercising that position of wealth. I always tell people, we grew up as a rich man's child. Back in the day, for your dad to be a director general of the Ministry of Health, we definitely grew up okay. Like, we grew up in the government residential area. We had house helps and all that. But my father made sure that every holiday we were at the village. We went to the village. For every single holiday. For more than 20-something years of my life, I spent every holiday in the village along with my siblings. And we would go to the farm. Like, we didn't need to, but he made us learn all these things because he needed us to understand that we were first and foremost from this place called the village, this Mbube community, before we became whoever we were. Those things were built into us without him having to say, like, you have to be this person, you have to be humble, you have to be hardworking, you don't have to be dependent on people, you have to build yourself and never forget your roots. These were the things that inspired me a whole lot. My father is a very great influence in my life.
Amazing. Yes, definitely. And I think you also mentioned that this was also what led you to be more Pan-African in your approach to things in general, because he had a very Pan-African influence on you, because I'm guessing that's what, do you think he developed that whilst he was in the States, that Pan-African look on life?
No, I think it was already in him before he left, because my dad grew up without a father. I think his father died when he was 3 years old. So he grew up with his uncle in the village and all that before he got sent by the Catholic missionaries to Italy to study medicine.
Oh, he got sent by the missionaries?
Yeah, he got sent by the Catholic missionaries to Italy to study. So he was a scholarship all through. He was very brilliant. He was a very brilliant chap. So he got the scholarship to go there and he's cool there. So he never forgot where he came from. And he wasn't the type he loved the life. He would always tell me stories of when he was in the village as a child. He would always beg his uncle to go palm wine tapping. He followed his uncle to go and tap palm wine from the trees and all that. Like he loved that lifestyle. And despite being in the West for so long, he never forgot his roots.
Amazing. That's wonderful. Oh, wow. Now, we might have to have your father on after this and interview him as well. So then you went on to study law because your dad was like, it would be nice to have a lawyer. So you started studying law and you studied law in Nigeria. What was that like? What is I'm interested in knowing what the Nigerian education system is like, once you get to university, because I hear a lot of negative things about it with teachers going on strike, people going on strike, and then people not being able to finish their degrees for years. And like a degree that's supposed to take 3 years, usually taking 5 years because of strikes. And what was your experience in studying law in Nigeria?
My experience with studying in Nigeria, I was fortunate of all my siblings to be the first person to go to a state university. And I think the major issue with education in Nigeria is the government. It's not the institution of education itself, but it's the government. They do not take education as a priority at all in Nigeria. The government don't take education, teachers as a priority in Nigeria. All my elder siblings went to University of Calabar, which is a federal university. They were always on strike. As long as I could remember when I was in secondary school, my elder ones were always calling for one strike or the other. My eldest brother, he's a doctor in the US, and he spent, he read medicine in Unical, and he was supposed to spend 6 years, but he ended up spending almost 9 years in university.
Wow.
Just to study in the course of 6 years. Because of strikes.
What are causing these strikes? Is it just teachers not being paid?
All the strikes you've ever had in Nigeria, literally 99% of the strikes in universities is because of either the payment is low or they are not being paid at all. Most of the strikes were the union going on strike because the governments don't pay. The pay for teachers is very small.
You're saying that the payment is low for teachers in Nigeria? Yeah,
there's inadequate funding. Inadequate funding is a great issue in institute for lecturers, for teachers, both the university, the tertiary level, the secondary level, the primary level. Teachers are very underpaid. They're undervalued. They're underpaid. So you have lack of skilled and trained teachers. You have inadequate learning infrastructures. You have lack of conducive environments. You have inadequate funding. All these affect the level of education.
That is interesting. I mean, I assume there's one of the main problems that a lot of African nations share is the weakness of the institution due to corruption and so on and not being set up properly. I also wanted to ask you about the actual education itself that you received. Did you feel like it was high quality education? Did they focus on trying to help you understand, or was it all just memorizing? Because that's what I remembered when I went to primary in Nigeria. It was all about memorizing something and just focusing on memory. It wasn't, the understanding of it wasn't as emphasized. Or I just wanted to see if it's the same for you.
I got quality education because back in the day, I don't know about now, I can't really say for now. When I went to university, I got quality education. My lecturers were professors, they had masters, they had PhD, and they were good. They were grounded. They were very grounded. When I as a state university, you see, that's why I was trying to put the difference between I going to a state university and those who went to federal university. I realized that there was a time when my school, I think when we're discussing outside here, I talked about the time when my school went on strike because of cultism and all. That was the one time that my Ebonyi State University went on strike all through my time in school because of cultists and fracas and all. So I was home for like 2-3 months. And because I hate boredom, I decided, let me go to lectures with law students in University of Calabar and just while away time there before they call us back. And I was in my first year in university before we went on strike. But I realized when I went to University of Calabar to join the law students there, what they were what I was taught in my first year is what they were teaching them in their second year.
I see.
So I was attending lectures with 200 level students while I was still in 100 level in my own school. So the level of education in the federal system and the state system, and then the private universities is very different. The states, because it's the state, is state control, they make sure they get the best lecturers they can get, way better than the federal universities. And then the private universities, definitely, they'll get way better. Some of them even bring in lecturers, professors, from outside the country to lecture their students. So the quality of education depends on the university you're going to. Is it federal university or is it state university or a private university? I got better education than the federal, because I went to a state university.
I see. Oh, see, I wasn't aware of that. You see, you learn something new every day. Private, federal, state. Interesting. So you went to university, you studied law, you aced it, came out excited. You told me you were excited coming out because you're like, I want to be a criminal lawyer. Then what happened?
I went to the Nigerian law school. That after the 5 years university, you go for the 1 year Nigerian law school to be called to the Nigerian bar. So during that period, we have court attachment and chambers attachment. So during my chambers attachment, I was with a law firm in Calabar. I remember one of the days we had a matter in court and my principal was in the office and he says to me, go to court and take a date for me. Tell them I traveled. And I'm like, but you're seated here. And he's like, yeah, I don't feel like going to court. And I was angry because I was going to lie. Yeah, it was a criminal matter. Yeah, he didn't feel like, so he said I should go take a date. I looked at him, I'm like, I can't do this. I went to the court and the judge is like, call the matter. I'm like, my lord, I'm sorry, my principal traveled and I'm feeling so vexed inside. Criminal matters, any matter at all in Nigeria, it drags for so long. Matters that you could finish in within months or a year. Sometimes you have matters running for 10 years, 5 years. And the people are frustrated. The clients are frustrated. Sometimes it's landlord and tenancy matter and it's running for so long. And both parties are frustrated. That's why you could get people in prisons awaiting trial. Some of them, their matters have not even been brought to court. And the trials are spanning so many years. And these people are in prison rotting away. So the judicial system just messed up my mentality. And I was like, I can't do litigation, man. This is going to frustrate me. I can't do litigation. And it's not in this country. So I just switched to company law and expertise myself in legal drafting. That suited me better.
And then you were doing company law for a while. And then at some point you decided, I'm going to give all of this up and move to Ghana and become a writer. Why?
It wasn't just at some point.
Okay.
So when I was in law school, I was still writing. Like I said, I started writing as a child. I remember when I was in secondary school, I wrote an article once to Vanguard, which was published.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I kept the writing thing, but I just didn't see it like a career. For me, it was a hobby. It was something I did, something I loved doing, something that was like my escape route. But in law school, when I was in law school, I wrote my first book, which I have never published. I wrote that book and it was beautiful. But I just threw it aside. It was just, for me, you love writing. When you feel so saddened, so burdened, you just throw it all out into pen and paper and all that. And then I kept writing like that. I was in Abuja for 5 years working as a lawyer. And it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating. Not because I wasn't making the money. I was making the money. And I was having the client. But I just wasn't finding fulfillment in it. It wasn't fulfilling for me. It was quite frustrating. Every day I'll go to companies. I like DAC, the Corporate Affairs Commission, and I'll come back. I'll do the company jobs. This client is calling you, they're paying you. I had clients paying me in dollars, but I wasn't happy with what I was doing. So I tried to search deeper inside me and I was like, so what do I do to make me happy, to give me this joy, this everyday joy, while I still do the law thing by the side? And I started sketching. I went into fashion. I love sketching. So I would sketch designs. And then I said, okay, cool. I'm good with this stuff. Why don't I go into fashion? It's a way of bringing out the creative side of it. So I went into fashion and I was in fashion for a few years and I did well with the fashion. I did some international fashion shows. I was one of the designers who showcased at the African Fashion Week Nigeria, the first one they had in Nigeria. I also showcased in the Nigerian Fashion Week. I got invited to the London Fashion Week and all that. But it's always a creative. And then you find yourself doing this very prim and proper profession called law. It's kind of choky. So I just needed someone to bring out that creative side of me, and fashion was it. But still, I wasn't finding fulfillment in it.
How did we transition into writer from there?
Yeah, I went into the fashion to bring out my creative side because the law was choking. So fashion did it for me. But still, I kind of felt very empty. I still wasn't finding fulfillment in both the fashion and the law. I was getting deep into depression. And so I finally left Nigeria by myself to Ghana.
Okay. And why did you choose Ghana?
I get asked this question like every single day here in Ghana. Everybody in Ghana like, so why Ghana? And I'm like, why not Ghana? I mean, I could have gone to Rwanda and they'll ask me, why Rwanda? Like, it could be anywhere.
Is it just proximity? It was close by?
No, it wasn't proximity. I mean, I had the choice of going a lot of countries. And I have siblings in the US. I could have decided that I just wanted to be in an African country. If I have to leave Nigeria, let's be another African country.
That's interesting. Why? Where do you think that comes from? You wanted to be in an African country and not wanting to leave?
I don't think, first of all, I'm African. I mean, why would I want to be elsewhere? And secondly, because this is where I relate to my roots. I don't have to walk on the streets and feel different. I don't have to go somewhere and feel like I'm not welcome. I'm in Ghana, but it doesn't feel like I'm not a Ghanaian. If I'm walking on the street, unless they speak with me and then they hear my accent and they're like, oh, you're not Ghanaian. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, it's like home.
I see.
If I'm in any African country, except South Africa, I'll feel like I'm home.
Why except South Africa?
Because they're xenophobic.
Yeah, the South Africans don't like Nigerians. I've heard that. Is that true? Like they don't like when we come through?
Yeah. And I never seem to get it. It's sad.
Have you been to South Africa?
Never.
I see. Based on what you've seen in the media and the way they treat Nigerians, are you more apprehensive of going to South Africa to visit?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, it was one of the African countries I used to want to be with because I don't want to call myself an activist, but I am very Pan-African. When it has to do with liberation, talks about getting Africa to its standard, getting Africa out of the Western Greece and all, I'm all in for it. That's why all my novels are African-centered. I used to admire Mandela. I want to go to the country where Mandela came from. But growing up, seeing how they are, not just to Nigerians, but to other African countries. Why do you go killing the man who has a fellow color of your skin because he looks like you? I never seem to understand it. I have a friend who is South African. I met him in Nigeria in 2011 and he's different. So I believe that there are those who are different. There are South Africans who are not xenophobic because he's very nice, he's very kind. We talk every now and then and you can see that he's a different person from the general xenophobic thing and all that. So I believe that there are those who are not. But it feels like the majority of them are. And I can never come to understand it.
Do you think that's because of what we see on social media and all the media that we're getting? We are being fed this information. Do you think it looks worse than it is? Like if you were to visit South Africa, could it be that maybe you don't experience any xenophobia and there is no xenophobia, but it's just because the few that there is heightened due to the use of social media?
Well, I can't say it's due to social media. I have a lot of Nigerian friends who live in South Africa, but there is this particular one. And the other day we were talking about this xenophobic thing. He lives in South Africa. He works there for years now. And he said that he came into the country, that's South Africa, from the UK. He had a job in UK, so he returned. But he gave his passport over to an airport official for stamping. And the lady sees that he's Nigerian and she goes, oh, so you're one of those people that comes to take our jobs. And he replies her, well, if you were qualified enough, I won't be taking your job.
I see.
Because... literally, so you're not trying to upgrade yourself to the standard of what you are killing people for being, doing. It's insane to think of, because I believe they are good South Africans. But it's like saying, I don't know. I don't know why. I can't comprehend why they do it. I can't comprehend xenophobic in any form.
I see.
And it's not just to Nigerians, it's to every other African country. So why? Why do you do that?
Yeah, I was going to add to that as somebody who's visited South Africa, that I would visit there, but I can't see myself living there long term because it is such a segregated community. If we're thinking about xenophobia, we're also thinking about Black South Africans versus white South Africans. How many years on, the racism continues, the apartheid continues, and it is very evident when you go to visit. So if that's happening to fellow Black South Africans, then anybody foreign is also going to experience that to some degree. I totally get where you're coming from.
Oh, so that's interesting.
But you see, the funny thing is, by this segregation they have, a Black South African would rather a white South African than another Black African.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've seen two scandals currently about South Africa in social media. The first is the model situation where they wouldn't let
Chidema.
Was she South African or what is the story there?
Chidema additional, her mother is South African. Her mother is Zulu. And then her father is Nigerian. And she was born in South Africa and she's lived there all her life. But simply because she has a Nigerian root, they would not allow her compete in the pageantry in South Africa because she had father is Nigerian. It's that bad.
Wow. And then there was a thing that said there was a white South African that won Miss South African.
Well, yeah, they kept having this forcing both to send Chidema out of the pageantry. It got so bad that the girl had to left the whole competition. And then a white South African won it. And they were rejoicing.
So they would rather a white South African win than...
Yeah, they would rather a white South African than
someone who is also South African.
Who is also South African. Simply because her father is Nigerian.
Interesting. Wow. That is quite
but
interesting.
You see that, but they would not have a problem. They don't have a problem with Trevor Noah, whose father is Greek and his mother is South African, because he had a white father.
I see. Okay. Interesting. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Now you got me thinking. I'm thinking I would want to get a South African on this podcast and ask him about this.
Yeah.
Because this is crazy.
There is
interesting.
a lot of...
And then the second thing. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying that, as Awe highlighted, there's a lot of double standards when it comes to South Africa. I think one of the maybe highlights or the inspiration is the current people challenging what's happening in Palestine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I can rate that about South Africa being a previous apartheid state, but unfortunately, it is still very problematic.
They still have problems. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I've been to South Africa too myself.
Nice.
I've been there, but I was only there for 2 or 3 days. I was in Cape Town and my experience was the same as yours, Samira, with regards to the segregation. It felt very uncomfortable for me because all the black people that I saw were doing menial service jobs. And like anytime I saw a black person in that area, they were there to like clean the garden or do housework and stuff like that. It was just white people living in that area. So it just felt very weird.
White South Africans who have never come across a black South African or a black person in their entire life, but they're living in the continent of Africa, and that always blows my mind. Like I was there, I was speaking to a few people who live there. There's like segregated communities, gated communities, and there are like, I don't know how many, but there are white people who have lived there all their lives and never interacted with a non-white person, let's say. So imagine.
Incredible. Wow. I was going to say one more thing before I move on from this South African topic. The second thing I was going to say was the thing that's been happening recently on social media with everyone ordering Ubers or Bolts. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me? What's going on?
Yeah, I have.
Why are people ordering Ubers in different countries?
South African started it.
Before you start, let me just explain for the listeners this is my understanding. My understanding is that South Africans started ordering Ubers, or is it Bolts? I'm not sure. Either one in Nigeria, saying that they were in Nigeria, but then when the Uber got close, they would cancel, saying that they're in South Africa, or they wouldn't cancel. They would just say they're in South Africa, so the Uber driver would have to cancel. And then Nigeria started doing the same, ordering Ubers in South Africa and then canceling when the Uber driver got close. It was just, the whole thing is so petty. But yes, explain, Awe. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, Nigerians were petty. You can't win a war with a Nigerian, like an online war for that matter. What happened was one South African that started it. He ordered a Bolt and probably he changed his VPN or something. I don't know, that he was in Nigeria. And the driver went to the venue and kept saying, I'm here. And he kept cutting the driver up, like down and all that. And then he made the mistake of screenshotting it and posting it on social media.
Okay.
And encouraging other South Africans to go ahead. And it even became a trend. Order a Bolt in Nigeria, challenge. It became a challenge for them. The Nigerians were like, okay, you guys want to do this one day. Nigerians started ordering Bolts in mass. I mean, we are a large country.
Yeah.
And when Nigerians want to follow, especially South Africa, they would do anything to get at South Africa's head. So they started ordering, and Nigerians they ordered so many Bolts to one location. So the place was cramped with a lot of Bolt vehicles, and people were stranded elsewhere. They couldn't even book. And when Nigerians realized that, it's not just Bolts we can also order, they started ordering food. They started ordering equipment. Yeah, they started ordering things from stores.
Wow.
And they'll give an address. So you just be in your house and you get a knock on the door, you ordered food and you're like, no, I didn't. And Nigeria took it 2 notches higher.
Crazy. That is crazy. Okay, let's move on from the South African topic because we came to talk about you.
All right.
You're in Ghana now. You've moved here. You've decided to move to Ghana. You don't know anyone. Did you have friends in Ghana when you moved to Ghana?
No, I didn't know nobody. I hadn't been to the country before. I don't have family here still.
You've never been to the country before?
Didn't.
Where did you even stay when you arrived? And how did you start writing? Did you just say, I'm going to go to Ghana, I'm going to become a writer?
I decided I just wanted to get away from the depressed way I was feeling in Nigeria, the pressure of going to the and all that. I needed to just run away from all that. I booked a flight, came over here. I didn't tell anyone in my house that I was leaving Nigeria. I just left. And when I came here, that was when I messaged them, called my dad. I'm no longer in Nigeria. I'm now in Ghana. And I started staying in a church for a little bit, but it was very unconducive. During the period, I was looking for a house and I got a house. So what I did was I made sure I had enough finances before I left Nigeria.
Okay.
So I got the house. But the unfortunate thing was when I moved in, when I relocated here, unfortunately for me, Buhari had just put up an embargo on withdrawing money outside the country and I didn't know. So when I got here with my ATM, I was going to withdraw cash and I couldn't withdraw my money.
Oh, wow.
So I was broke.
Oh, wow. In Ghana,
I was broke
with
for
no
a
money.
very long time.
Goodness gracious. So what did you do?
I was
what
broke
happened?
for a very long time. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole lot.
Okay.
That's a podcast of 1 hour of its own.
Okay, cool.
It's challenging because I kept trying to get a job. And because I was determined to start all over here, I went to a lot of places. I went to radio stations. I went to makeup studios. I went to restaurants and bars. I mean, I was a lawyer way back in Nigeria, but I didn't mind start doing those jobs here to my feet on something. But everywhere I went to, even the radio station, but they saw my CV. They said, oh, you're very qualified for the job, but we can't give you the job because you're Nigerian.
I don't understand.
They have a policy, Ghanaian first. So they would rather employ a Ghanaian, sometimes who is even underqualified than you, who is a Nigerian.
I see.
It's sad, but yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of this.
Okay, it was very tough for me. With all the qualifications I got, I couldn't get a job because you're Nigerian. I even went to an Indian company. I mean, that's neutral, so they should be able to employ me and all. And they said, we are sorry, we can't employ you because they come to check every now and then and to make sure that our staff is Ghanaians.
Okay.
So I couldn't get a job too. And there's this thing about residency. That's another thing I think is going to come under the African thing, talk and all that, but I'll just chip it in. Even as a West African country, I mean, we are West African. We are literally ECOWAS. But as a Nigerian living here, I have to renew my permit every year. And it's the same amount.
You have to pay the same amount every year to renew your residency.
Yeah, you have to pay your residency every year as a Nigerian or any other ECOWAS country. And it costs $500. And then you do the medicals, which is about 900 to 1,000 CDs. You do the Ghana card, which you're supposed to renew every year again. It's the same information. So the Ghanaians don't renew theirs, but as a foreigner, you have to renew yours every year. And that one costs about $100. So it's a whole lot of money. And for you to get international jobs, they want to know that you have the permit to stay here. So it's really difficult, but I'm quite a determined person and I have survived and I have grown and I have established.
How did you get into writing whilst you were in Ghana?
I actually got to a point of frustration. Going everywhere, you're applying everywhere and you're getting a no. Not a reasonable no, a no because you're not Ghanaian. It got me frustrated and I'm a born-again Christian, so I went into prayer. I was like, God, you need to tell me why. Why can't I get these jobs? Like, what's happening? I was very frustrated. And then I prayed and that was like going into writing. That's who you are. I'm like, writing. Writing is a hobby. Who does that? Like, who writes for money? Who makes money from writing? I mean, J.K. Rowling does, but at the time it didn't seem feasible. How am I supposed to start? Like, I had never seen writing to be something I would take like a career. So it took me a while. I was like, right. So I started. That was when I wrote Conversations with God. That was my first book. And I wrote it. I got in touch with people in Nigeria. Now, another thing about publishing in Africa, Nigeria and Ghana particularly, we have more of printers than publishers. They'll tell you they're a publishing house, but you send your manuscript and they'll give you a quotation. If you want to print this number of copies, this is the amount. Like,
oh, I see.
Yeah,
with the whole marketing, with the whole editing your book, they don't provide any of those services. It's just
everything
printing.
is on you. You're going to pay for everything. So like just say you are printers. So it's very difficult to get publishers. There are very few publishers. I think, is it Okana Books? Yeah, they were an online publishing house, but now they packed up because of the government of Nigeria of the day. But it was just one or two houses, publishing houses in Nigeria that you could really say, yes, they would take your books. But even I tried them. They sent me to the quotation side of their company. Oh, we have these printing services. You can pay for this. So it was a very difficult thing. So literally, I published my first books with my own money. You pay printers, you have to pay someone to edit and everything. That was how my first book came out. Conversations with God. And that's when I decided to, okay, this writing thing is not so bad. I mean, I've always been good with storytelling.
Were you making money from that book?
I didn't make as much money as I did with The Dead Do Talk and Secrets of the Book, because it was the first one. So you have to market, you have to put yourself out. Everybody has known you as a lawyer and a fashion designer, because as a fashion designer, I was quite known in Nigeria, and I was in the shows, the TVs, the interviews and all. And now you're trying to present yourself as a writer. First of all, people are looking at you like you're confused. You don't know what you want in life. And then you're trying to let them understand that, no, I do know what I want, but it's taken me a while to get here to understand that this is what I really need to do. So it was more like introducing yourself as a writer to the world, to the people who know you and to the people who don't. So that's what that first book really was like. But I got a lot of reviews from it, good reviews, people who bought, who I didn't even know. They were very blessed by it. That's a non-fiction one. And then I wrote Secrets of the Book. I didn't think, when I started writing Secrets of the Book, I didn't think I could write up to 5 pages, because I had never written a non-fiction novel. And I felt, how am I supposed to start building story from nowhere? Like a non-existent story, come just my idea and then build on it and expansion. I'm not even going to get to 100 pages, but it ended up being about 200 or 300 pages.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, cool. So I am gifted in this thing.
What's it about? But by the way, I love this. I love hearing this, because I'm a writer too. And I also started writing from I also started writing from a very young age. And then after university, whilst working in tech, I started writing comics. And for me, writing nonfiction has always been amazing. It's always been fun. It's always been like it's the best thing I could, like, it feels like opening a whole new world. It feels like an escape. So I enjoy that whole process.
I know, right?
So for you, who is completely new to writing nonfiction, I wonder how that must have felt. Did you feel weird? Did you feel out of your depth? Did you feel uncomfortable?
I didn't feel uncomfortable, because despite the fact that I had never been into fiction writing, I have always been an ardent reader. I mean, I started reading John Grisham when I was in GSS 1.
For the listeners, GSS 1 is year 1 of secondary school. So that's like year 7 in the UK or I don't know, something like that.
Oh,
high
okay.
School.
Yeah, high school. My first year of high school. So I started reading Milk. Like, I never read Milk Sample. There's this other one, James Harley Chase. All those books. I was a child when I started reading those mature novels. So my mind was already expanded to fiction. And I can't count how many books I've read in my life. I love reading. So being the one writing the story was exciting. It was like a journey. It was the same thing like packing my bags and leaving Nigeria, not knowing where I was going.
It's an adventure,
I don't know anybody in this new country, Ghana. I'm just going in. Okay, it's an adventure. I'm going to start life. I'm going to build. I'm going to grow. That's what it was like, right? In the first fiction. It was a beautiful journey. It was an adventure. It was like, what's lying ahead? Let's see. What's the next page going to be? What's this character going to tell me next?
Yeah.
So I enjoy every part of it. And I don't want to write nonfiction ever.
You don't want to write nonfiction anymore, right?
I mean, fiction is exciting.
Exactly. That's what I don't get people that write nonfiction. Like, fiction is so fun. It's like the best thing. I enjoy it so much. Did you know the characters a lot? Like, did you connect with the characters before you started writing the book? Or did you get to know the characters as you were writing the book? The
first 2 novels, for The Dead Who Talk and Secrets of the Book, importantly, I didn't know any of the writers. I was getting to know them through the journey.
Okay.
It was like they were telling me their own story. Whenever you're explaining this to someone who is not a writer, they look at you like you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But these characters have lives.
Yeah.
And that's why I found it so exciting, because I didn't know what they were going to tell me next. I didn't know where they were going to go. So I finished writing today. I closed my book.
I'm actually curious now. Can you give like a one-liner for each of those books so I know what it's about? The Secrets of the Book and The Dead Do Talk.
Okay.
One-liner.
The Dead Do Talk is it's a story about a girl called Amifani. She's like a philosopher into villages that are almost unknown or going extinct in Africa. She likes to go into these villages, make researches, do videos, the lifestyle, put it out there like, we still have these cultures and traditions in our country, in Africa and all that. And then she got into this village, and before she gets accepted, she's told that she has to go through a traditional medicine person and she realizes it's a woman. And the woman does all the charms and said, oh, you are welcome. You don't bring any evil, but the person you're running away from is here. He will find you here. And she's like, I'm not running away from nobody. But through the story, we get to find out that she's actually running away from someone. And the person is dead.
The person is
he's
dead.
Trying to speak to her. Yeah, that's the title, The Dead Do Talk.
Oh, I
So
see.
he's trying to speak to her from the dead, land of the dead. I have chapters where it's about her in the village, everything she encounters in the village that's trying to bring her to that person that she's running away. Then we have the land of the dead. What happens in the land of the dead? And it's so exciting because I've never been dead.
So you're writing about the land. Oh, I see.
I've never been dead, but you have to be creative. You have to put yourself in the land of the dead, and what goes on when people die. So it was exciting.
Very nice. And
Yeah.
So that was about a journalist exploring a village and speaking to someone from the land of the dead. And then what is the other one, Secrets of the Book? What's that about?
Secrets of the Book is about a girl who doesn't know that she was born with abilities. It's an epic fantasy. So she doesn't know she was born with abilities. And she doesn't either know that there are other humans except herself and her mom. And she doesn't know that she is a princess. Because on the day she was born, father used to be the king, but on the day she was born, the father's commander of the army overthrew. He plotted against the king, killed the king, overthrew, and became the king of their kingdom. So her mother ran away with her into a forest. So she has grown up 16 years in this forest, believing that it's just her mother, and the animals in the forest until one day, being an adventurous girl, she goes into one of the caves and then she's following some light thing and then she realizes it triggers her. She finds the book. It's just a plain book and she starts writing and it takes her back to the beginning, the day she was born. And she realizes, wait, my father used to be a king. There's a kingdom. He was killed. And then she realizes all these powers. And now, so she's fighting revenge because she gets in contact with the man who killed her father. She gets in contact with his son, who is now the prince. So she's battling revenge against killing this person who, your father killed my father. So I have every reason to kill you. You're my domain. And she's fighting knowing her new abilities, I am literally supposed to be the one to save the world from the evil that this king has brought out. And she's also fighting knowing her new identity. But in the end, one has to win. Okay,
amazing. These are the two books, Secrets of the Book and The Dead Do Talk. You wrote both of them. Did you get it published through one of the big main publishers or did you have to do it yourself again?
I had to do that myself again. It was tough. Publishing, and I published both of them at the same time. So they came out at the same time. That was a lot of money. Don't ask me how much.
No, that's fine.
But that's another problem we find in publishers. I mean, almost every writer faces that, getting agents to get you publishers and all that. And I have 3 other manuscripts, non-fiction also. And one of them I've been sending to a lot of agents. That has to do with psychology. I'm also this person who loves mental health and studying mental health. I love anything that talks about mental health. It tilted towards mental. What I do in my stories, I pick something, an issue in the society, an issue that people go through and try to make it into fiction. I got 3 agents who love the story, but they kept saying mental health is difficult to sell as a story.
Are these agents in Africa?
No, they're not.
Where were the agents that you were trying to get from?
One of them is based in the UK, but I think she's Irish. She was very interested. She read the first 50 pages and she was like, within 2 days, she was like, can I get the rest of the book? I want to read it all. And she was so excited. Within 7 days, she was done reading. And she was like, she really loved the story and the unexpected ending. And all that. She had a friend once who also wrote psychological thriller, and she tried her best to get publishers for it, but she couldn't. And that's the only reason why she wants to pass on this, because she knows she's tried before to get someone else published on psychological thriller. But at the end of the day, because she was like, reading the book was like watching Sixth Sense for her. I don't know if you watched that film. I think it's a Bruce Willis film or something.
Yeah.
Unexpected ending and everything. It was a good feel getting the replies and all, but I just felt maybe for their society, it's not best for them. But I'm still trying while I still keep writing.
Would you say this is part of your mission because I know you wanted to speak about getting African writers in general to write on a more global level, basically. Yeah. Would you say that African writers would need to go find agents out of Africa in order to achieve this global level of writing?
We wanted this right now. That's what it looks like. Because I don't know if you've read We Were Once Fireflies.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. It was Abubakar, my second name. It's helping me if I remember his second name. Now, books like that, we haven't good writers in Nigeria. We have amazing writers in Nigeria, in Ghana, in other African countries, Kenya. There are amazing writers that are coming out from these African countries. But if you check the publishers, they are all Western publishers. And a lot of stories are yet untold because it is very difficult to get publishers in Africa. And the few publishers we have in Africa, like I said, they would rather print. They will give you for quotations and all that. The system is difficult.
Why is it so hard to have publishers in Africa, in Nigeria, in these places?
Take Nigeria, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the machines for publishing and everything. Oh, you don't have life.
Oh.
You are running on diesel. Do you get? So these are these little fundamentals that is a whole lot. You're running on diesel, and then most of them have to import the cover pages from China and the rest, because the quality they will give you in Nigeria, the gloss and everything, quality of the gloss cover pages you get and all that, they say, oh, it's different. So they have to import from the US. And also, if you check a book published in Nigeria, like actually published in Nigeria, and the one published from, let's say, any other Western country, the paper quality is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different.
But in today's age where most people, I don't know, I'm just guessing, a lot of people read through Kindle and other digital devices. Does it matter that much about having a publisher?
You would think it doesn't, but it still does. Because a lot of times, especially the agents, when you're talking to an agent, they want to know if you have physical books. When you're talking to people, they want to know if you have physical. Oh, so you've only published author. Are you ebook or copy? They want to know if you have a paper book. They will not take you as serious that you publish online, like if you have actual books that they can see. It's still a thing. It's way easier for you to publish online.
Mm-hmm. How do you see African writers becoming more global? Like, if we were to try to put forward some sort of solution, some sort of action that African writers can do in order to achieve that success of becoming more global, what do you think that we should be looking to do? Should we be looking to build a whole publishing ecosystem in African countries? Or should every African writer just be targeting agents in the West?
We need to fill our own space, because if we keep targeting the West, we are just going to be a selected few.
Let's talk about the importance of storytelling, why you feel it's so important, how you think it can help with empowering Africans in general and help to achieve the goal, which I'm trying to set out to do in this podcast, which is to empower Africans and increase the global respect for the Black and African diaspora. So how do you think storytelling can help to achieve that?
Storytelling is like predicting the future, or it's like setting a pace for what should be. As much as a lot of us see storytelling like, oh, it's just some stories you're telling. No, it's actually a life being built, or the past being shaped into the mindsets of people. I could also say storytelling is like past and present history as much as it is future history. So it is very important for Africans to tell African story, because we are the ones who are facing our challenges. We are the ones who are going through whatever we are going through. We are the ones who understand the trajectory of what should be and what is not.
How we can possibly empower Africans through the power of storytelling.
African stories should be told by Africans, because we as African storytellers who understand what we are facing, we understand the trajectory of what African life is, what Africans go through, and what possibly could be done to change the face of Africa through storytelling. It's just like when you watch a movie. When you watch movies, mostly Africans are portrayed like the poor people, the malnourished people, starvation. And that's what the West did so much that a lot of people actually, when they come to Africa, Nigeria or Ghana or any other African country and they see civilization, oh, it's actually a lovely place. Yeah, it is a lovely place, of course. What would you think? But you don't blame them, because the stories they have been given is a one-sided story that, oh, we are so malnourished and impoverished. So when we as African storytellers actually put out our stories there, we actually let the world know. We change the trajectory of what we see, of what the people coming after us get to understand, what they read, and how they change their mentality and towards us as Africans, and to empower writers in Africa. I believe strongly that if we can start appreciating the writers we have here, and we choosing to publish ourselves without having to go through, like, okay, I have a wonderful The people who have read through that manuscript, I mean, that's an Irish agent say she lost the story. The song is an amazing story, and it concerns how people view dissociative identity disorder in Africa. Because something like that, if you have that in Africa, you're turned either a witch or you're suffering from some disease or something. Nobody believes that mental health is real. Nobody believes that actually somebody in Africa or in Ghana or in Nigeria is going to go through dissociative identity disorder. But we face it every day. So these are our stories to tell. But I can't get that book published now because a Western person can't publish it for me. And if an African publishes for me, what's the possibility that it will go far? That what is the assurance that I can get that a whole lot of places?
So if an African house was to publish, an African company was to publish books, you don't think it would go as far as if a Western agency was to publish the book or Western publisher was to do it?
A lot of bookshops or a lot of places where books are sold, a lot of places where they can go to. The African people don't have access to this. And even though they do, they have a certain limitation. So it's like, the Western people, they can get my books as far. Now, we have a lot of Nigerian authors, let me not say African, Nigerian authors who are very known, but they have lived their entire lives in the UK. And so they were not published by Nigerians or African publishers. The reason they are this known is because they live in the UK, they live in the US, they're writing stories. These stories that do not actually tell African stories. These stories that are more of projecting the West into Africa.
Is there something about the fact that mental health is stigmatized? So the nature of the book and its audiences?
Yeah, there were two Nigerian authors I read. One stays she was born in the US, and the other in the UK. And when I read both stories, both novels, it was nothing related to Africa. I mean, it was an African story, but they told it in a UK sense of way, an American sense of way that did not portray anything Africa. Because that's where they live their entire life. They have not really stated what it is to be an African. They haven't stated what it is to be in Africa and to go through the nuances you go through in Africa. But I mean, because the fact that they are in the US, they can write, they have this few African terminologies they've heard from their parents probably. So they just insert it in the book and then, she's using an African book. I just found out that the bookshops in Nigeria are promoting these people way more than the Nigerians who live in Nigeria and have written good books. Because they're outside the country. They will publish outside the country. So they are promoted way above those who are living in the country and have gone through the stories in the country and have written very outstanding stories.
So we are prioritizing
we are prioritizing
work coming from European lands.
Coming from other, we are prioritizing that. That's the basic truth.
And do you think this is a legacy of colonization? This is a legacy of us thinking they're better than us?
Yeah, they think.
Or anything that happens in the white man's land is better than anything we can produce in our.
It is deeply rooted in that. Let me divert a little from even the right. If you go to radio stations, half of the OAPs, the presenters and the rest, they have accent. If you're not from the UK, because people just come from the UK, it's difficult to get a job in the UK, it's difficult to get a job in the US. Let me come to Nigeria. As long as they know that I was in the UK or I'm in the US, it will be easier for me to get a job. And that's what is done. So if you go to the radio stations, they have the accent, the American accent or the UK accent. And if you were not born there or live there, you have to groom it because you have to stand and push on the radio. And it doesn't sit well. You watch reality shows and those who have their Igbo accent, they are being taunted because, why is she speaking like that? I mean, she's an Igbo girl. How do you expect her to speak? So it is deeply rooted in colonization. It's deeply rooted in the fact that they put above ourselves those who have the whiter skin color. Because even the Black Americans who are in the US look down on the Africans. And, sometimes whenever there is that battle between Black Americans and Africans on social media, Twitter especially, the way they look at Africans, please, we're not one of you, we're Black Americans. What the hell? You are Africans. You're not better than us because you have American ties to you or something. So it's just that mentality. It's a mentality that as long as you're African, you are lower, you are beneath, you are not as good as. And if you've watched the Africans who have risen, and not all the Africans, not all definitely, but majority of the Africans who have risen to a pedestal in their professions, whatever the professions are, they were brought out by the Western. They were noticed by the Western. They were made known to the world by the Western. Because even in Nigeria, you will not be known as much until the Western are recognizing. before you're fully recognized.
I see.
And that's what we are facing. It's just like how people would ask me when I say, well, I don't have any interest in being in the West. I mean, if I have to go to the US or something, I have to go because I have a reason probably to go write or do a research. And then I come back and they're like, why? Are you okay? Why would you want to go live there? I'm like, what is wrong with Africa? Why can't I live in Africa? But it's all rooted in as much as we don't like to believe it, it's all rooted in what Africa went through colonization. We always still view it. I was talking to a friend recently. He posted something on his WhatsApp status that has to talk about cultural appropriation. And I was saying, all these people who talk about, you see a white person on town roads and you're like, oh, your culture. And then, you have my kind of hair fixed to your head. It's not your natural hair. Unless you're carrying an afro, you don't have the right to tell the person carrying a cornrow, a white person carrying a cornrow, that they're cultural appropriation. You are also doing what they are doing. Have the mind, have the pride.
Cultural appropriation,
and have the pride in you to have your own afro before you can tell somebody else that they're doing what is not theirs. But we put anything that comes from the white above us. And ours might be very good. It's the same thing happening in Nigeria. We have this guy in no school. He makes vehicles. And his vehicles are good. But his vehicles are not accepted by the government of Nigeria. He's taking a whole lot of fights and battles. Why? Because he's made in Nigeria. They would rather import vehicles outside than promote a Nigerian who makes good vehicles, because it's not Nigerian that made it, so it's not good. So we have that mentality that as long as it is made in Africa, it is not good. We import things as little as toothpick, cloth. We import all those things. Why?
I just wanted to recap the point that we're making, and just so I can make sure that I understand your perspective. So an important way, or a great way, to empower Africans in general is by making sure that we tell our own stories and we get our stories out there, right? However, in order for us to get our stories out there, we are facing this barrier where we have to go through publishers, and the publishing ecosystem in Nigeria and Ghana, from your experience, hasn't been that great. So you have to go through Western publishers and rely on them to say yes or no. So if there was a way for us to get the storytellers within Africa to share their stories with other Africans and make their stories go global from Africa without having to go through the West, you think that would be a great start to solving this?
That would be not just a great, but an amazing start and foundation. That would be an amazing foundation to begin a whole lot, because there is a whole lot that African writers can do for themselves without having to wait for the West. So if that can be done, that would be amazing.
And isn't that something that we can do through technology today? Through just African writers publishing books on Amazon and all these other platforms? Or do you think the audience if you want the audience to be Africa, how do you think the audience reads books? How do they get their books, the audience in Africa? Do they get it online, or do they get it by going into this bookstore?
Africans, contrary to popular belief that a lot of Africans don't read, a lot of Africans read. Yeah, a lot of readers. And bookshops are very, I think in Africa, in Nigeria, we have lots of bookshops. In Ghana, we have lots of bookshops. And I believe that a Nigerian would rather read a hard copy book that he can see than an ebook, because the internet is something that is easily distracting. So when you're on their tablet, on their Kindle or whatever and reading, something else could just come up and before you know that. But when it's a hard book, they can carry around, they can read it around. And as much as if you like I pointed out earlier that publishing on ebooks, Kindles and all that is easier. But a lot of people would rather honor you when you have a hard copy they can see. If you're going somewhere and they say, oh, she's a publisher, we want to see your books. You know, it's on Amazon, it's on ebook, it's Kindle. They won't take you as serious. You have to have hard copy.
Do you think in Africa, in order for the audience, the people, to take you seriously with the stories and the books that you're writing, it's not enough for it to be an ebook? They put priority on something that has been published physically.
Yeah, it's not enough to have just ebooks. When you have copy, they will honor you. You'll be so highly honored. They'll put it in their bookshelf.
I prefer hard copy books, but I do know, as with the internet and most people accessing things online, that is slowly shifting here in the West. And I don't know if that could be the case in Africa too. But the thought that came into my mind was the education system and the kind of books that I introduced in the education system. Are there books from the West? Like if you're studying English literature, for example, are there books from the West, or are African writers being promoted throughout the education system from your experience? I'd love to hear more about that.
When I was in secondary school, majority of the literature books I read were African based. Chona Chibere, Wole Soyinka, Chemecheta, Amataido, Storyteller. These were the books I read growing up. I read Robert Stevenson, Treasure Island. I read more of Hamlet, and Shakespeare. I think we did a whole lot of Shakespeare's collection. But I can't say for now if a lot of African writers are being read in secondary school. Growing up, I read a lot of literature books written by African authors. Chona Chibere, Wole Soyinka, Buche Mecheta, Famous Officer, and the rest. Amataido, Storyteller. I also read a lot of Shakespeare's books, a lot of his collections. I read Robert Stevenson's Treasure Island. But I cannot say for now if a lot of African writers are being read in secondary school. I am currently trying to get my book, one of my books I wrote for secondary school. I've been trying for almost 2 years now to get my book, one of my books I wrote for secondary school, into secondary school literature.
How is the process of you getting your book into the secondary schools? How is that going?
Yeah, it's not supposed to be something difficult. You submit the copies, you have the video. I have sent to both the federal and my state. And I think they said the feedback, it's an amazing story to be good for school. But nobody is accepting to, this person will say, this person has to be in charge. Call this person. You need to give it a percentage, or we agree on a percentage. So if you don't, they have to be, okay, so what do I get from it for it to go through?
So you think the general attitude of corruption and bureaucracy is getting in the way
definitely
is blocking?
In the way, because the way it is right now, if you don't have someone there, it will be difficult for your book to be selected.
I see. Just to wrap this up, if you were to give people advice, like if we're trying to give practical advice to our listeners, what practical tips can they take from this conversation that we've just had, in your opinion, with regards to how we can find ways to not only empower ourselves, but increase the respect that we get globally? What do you think we should be doing? Because we've identified a problem with publishing, yeah? We haven't discussed solutions. Is there something like somebody like myself can do, or someone that's listening to this in Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya, for example, that they can do to try to overcome or take things to the next step if they're trying to get their stories out there?
Well, the first thing you should do is if you're trying to be a writer, but don't worry. I mean, it can be a bit frustrating, but it's a determination and it's about passion. I mentioned passion in the very beginning. You have to be passionate about what you're doing, whatever it is. You have to be passionate about what you decide to do. And when you make that decision to be passionate about it and to go ahead with it, despite the challenges you face, you should solve through it. Just solve through it and keep at it. Be diligent with it. When I look back at stories I wrote from 2009, 2008, I'm laughing at myself as, did I really write this? But at the time, it was top notch for me. But I have realized that the more I write, the better I get. Both my language, my style and everything, my perception, how I narrate the stories, how I put the stories together. Everything changes when you keep practicing, when you keep doing. And if you stop at the point where it's difficult, you will never be able to get to your destination. It's going to just keep being difficult. So just keep at it, and you get to realize that you become better and better. And as much as it is difficult to get a story out there, once your story is good, it will go out. So write a story. Don't just write a good story.
Okay. And you believe if the story is good, it will find its way out there, whether that's having to go through the West or whether that's going through the few publishers that we have in Africa, or maybe just self-publishing.
Maybe just self-publish. It would definitely go out there. Just like the fact that I publish my books myself, on my IG, I always get messages from people who bought on Amazon that I don't know. I don't know what country they come from. And they send me messages. We read this book. It's so amazing. I get almost every now and then I get random readers who message me on IG mostly.
Oh, so you see?
Yeah.
The internet is helping. If there are more African writers out there and they're publishing their books online and they're getting it out, there'll be people out there that will buy it and read it. That is a way to democratize this problem of publishing that we're seeing in a small way. Having a hard copy is always better. Storytelling is an important way to empower Africans, is what we've established in this conversation. Yeah. And it's an important way to get our stories out there. And if they can do it digitally, that's a way to circumvent the institutional issues that you've mentioned. I think the second thing that we discussed was the whole thing of people within Africa prioritizing books that come from US.
Western African writers.
Yeah, prioritizing Western writers over African writers, right? In Africa. Is there something we can share, a message we can share to them to be like, let's give African writers a chance? What can we say to change that?
What could we do to amplify their voices to our listeners?
No matter how good a writer you are, it's somebody else that's going to tell your story out there. You put it out there, but it has to be the reader who says, oh, I love this story. I had one German-American guy who was in Ghana, and he went through one of my books, and he loved it so much that he had to buy for his sister who was in Germany and sent all the way. He had it rebuilt from Nigeria to Germany. It's the readers who make us known as writers. It's the readers who put our work. I thought we put it out there, but readers make it, oh, I love this book. Oh, I reviewed this book. Reviews go a long way to publicize the work of writers without having to wait for people to pay you for a review. As a reader, if you love a book written by an African, put it out there. Make it known that this book is amazing. Let people go to read it. It's a marketing strategy in Nigeria. If you want people to review, you pay. It's everywhere. It's not just in Nigeria. It's everywhere across the world.
But based on what you're saying, what we could do with regards to the people listening to this podcast and like a self-help tip that we could all do is we make more of an effort to read African authors. And when we read African authors and we like it, we make noise about it.
Hype it, like on all your social medias. So that's one of the ways we can do that. And then if we can have, even if it means having an online forum or conversations from time to time between readers and African authors, it's a beautiful way to share the stories, tell the way forward about it, because African writers are actually good writers and they need to be allowed that platform. So if you're out there, you're an African writer, don't quit. If you're a reader, please keep reading African books. Both, one of the reasons why also African authors who live outside and both the ones in Africa, they are all good writers at the end of the day. So please read their books. We have people like Chimamanda who have come out. We have made people the word to realize that, Africans can write good stories. So we have so much more. We have so much more amazing writers. There are amazing writers in Nigeria. Like there's this book, Egosa. I can't remember the title of the book. I think it's an amazing writer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's only a few writers that you say have got this like Western recognition and sometimes even leave Africa to continue with their work. I was thinking, let's say there's someone listening who's from Nigeria, from Ghana, or anywhere in Africa, and they want to start reading more African literature. In addition to this, I'm thinking about literature written in different languages and dialects as well. Is there a go-to space? Of course, I would highly recommend them to read your work, but is there like a go-to space where, like a library or something, where people can explore kind of their interests, focusing on African authors?
Right now, I'm not aware of any, and that's the point I was making when we talk. If we could have that and a space, conversations, it is where African writers and readers can come together. I think I made the point before you went up. I know Okada books used to do that, but unfortunately, because of, like I said, the economy in Nigeria right now, they have to shut down and everything. Okada books, you can go and see lots of African writers, lots of African stories. It was an online publishing site where you could all let's go get books and read. But it would be amazing for us to have that. And I wouldn't mind being a part of it. It would please me a lot to be a part of it. A community of writers and readers from Africa. So tell the stories and read the stories and take the stories out to the world. Because if the West is not going to do this for us, we have to do it for ourselves.
Exactly that, right? We've just created something here where hopefully somebody listening is interested in developing this idea. We can facilitate that potentially. That's a very direct solution. We need something that existed before, doesn't anymore, but can. And that is one way to amplify authors, but also potentially end up, it could develop into its own publishing company, or it can expand. The idea can expand for sure.
Awe, thank you for your time. I appreciate this conversation. I have really, really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we can have you back on at some point and continue it. I got caught up in your story and everything, but I feel like there's a lot more to explore, especially from the perspective of African writers.
Yeah, I was going to say we might have potential listeners who are avid or aspiring writers, and it could be something where people also send their questions in, be able to explore that a bit more. Yeah, but we really enjoyed hearing from you for sure. You definitely captivated us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
For everyone that's listening, I'm going to put links to Awe's books in the description. So you can click on those links and check out her books. Pretty amazing. I'm interested myself. I don't know. Maybe the next step for you is to get audiobook versions of your book.
Definitely. And what is with that?
Yes. Because I prefer to listen to books rather than reading them because I don't have the patience. But I'm sure there are many people that prefers to read them. But yeah, I'll put those links in the description. And yeah, I just want to say once again, thank you so much for coming on, Awe. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you, Hameed. It's been a pleasure.
By the time we finish, leaders will never transgress. If I take you to the motherland.